Dead Island 2 doesn't hold your hands too much and really wants you to go out there and explore. Between the hordes of zombies, piles of loot, and skill cards to collect, here are some of the things that I wish I knew sooner. But before we jump in, a quick word from our sponsor, ExpressVPN. Your online privacy is important, so don't just let somebody else take control of it. With ExpressVPN, you can browse the internet securely and anonymously without the fear of anyone seeing what you're browsing, be it your internet provider, school, workplace, or government agencies. That's because ExpressVPN reroutes all of your traffic through their encrypted servers to ensure your online activity is kept private and your data is secure. But that's not all. You can connect to over 90 servers all across the world, whether you're traveling or just want to watch your favorite TV show. Like if you enjoyed Hogwarts Legacy and want to watch the Harry Potter movies on Netflix, these are only available in 3 countries, so it's nice to pass that restriction. Plus, it's easy to use with all your devices, including smartphones, laptops, and smart TVs, so you can always keep your personal info safe. Definitely make sure to click on the links in the description and go to expressvpn.com/KhrazeGaming and also get 3 extra months for free. Again, big thanks to ExpressVPN for the sponsorship, and now back to the video. Starting things off, the game really wants you to go off the beaten path and just discover. There are lots of secret areas, hidden stashes, side missions, and missing contracts that will provide the best items, resources, and even skill cards. Let's begin with the lockboxes, as every map has a few, and they even mention all you need is to find the zombie with the key to open them up. But what they don't tell you is where and how these zombies look like, so here are a few guidelines. 1. Just follow the theme. If you find a military cache, for example, then the key will drop from an army infected, such as a drill sergeant. If a stash is hidden in the laundry room, then its key is upon the cleaning staff lady, and so on. 2nd, pay attention to the zombie names, because unique, named, and nondescript infected are the ones that you're looking for, so you can completely ignore the regular ones. And finally, not all zombies with the key spawn right from the start. Sometimes they appear after certain moments in the main story or after completing certain side missions. They also tend to spawn relatively close to the cache locations, so if you don't see them pop up, it's totally fine to move on for now and come back later. Moving on to number 2, continuing with the importance of loot, many times you'll find these panels that require fuses to open up. You will generally want to open these too, since they always open up a garage or other secret areas filled with crafting mats and an extra loot cache for more powerful items. Unfortunately, fuses can be found very rarely in the open world, so a more immediate solution is to just buy a bunch from any nearby vendor. They only cost about 1500 each, but it's totally worth it to buy a bunch every time you go by a vendor in any of the safe houses. The loot inside caches will keep up with your level too, so you can always get something that's immediately useful. Eventually, with the abundance of drops, you can just sell the items that you don't need and more than afford these as you move on through the campaign. Let's not forget about side quests either, which are indicated with the blue icons. These are generally fetch quests, not too difficult to complete, and will involve helping other characters out. But many times they provide skill cards that you cannot get otherwise on top of the extra loot and the XP, so it's always worth it to do them as they become available. Each map has a few of them at least, with new ones appearing as you progress through the main story. Most important though is the fact that a lot of the areas that appear locked at first or are inaccessible in fact need to be opened up via a specific side quest. For example, one of the houses in Beverly Hills has an entire section that you can only open up during the side mission called The Ballad of Ricky Rex, which further gives access to other lockboxes and unique spawns for the missing keys. At number 3, let's talk about combat and a few ways to deal with the ever-present groups of zombies more easily. First, you don't have to fight them all since they constantly respawn even as you just turn out a corner, so it's totally fine to skip most of them towards your destination. Second, elementals plus the environment equals some really great AoE and damage. That's why carrying at least one elemental type weapon will make your life a lot easier. For example, whenever you see a bunch of infected in or around the water, make sure to electrify it to take them all down at the same time. Similarly, there are lots of oil spots you can set on fire or corrosive chemicals you can spill to melt even your toughest foes, but just do keep in mind that some of them can have different resistances, which is why I recommended different types of elemental weapons. There's even canisters, barrels, and lots of other ways the game lets you control large groups of enemies without even having to use your own weapons. Curveballs is another mechanic to keep in mind. These are your throwables, including grenades, grenades, shurikens, and molotovs that you find while you're exploring and also when just progressing through the game. Oftentimes, they are very powerful at both single and AoE target damage. But it's great to take enemies from afar when all things fail, plus they don't even get consumed. Instead, they have a cooldown, so you should always make sure to use them back to back. There's even skill cards to reduce the cooldown, so you can spam them a lot more often. Speaking of skill cards, they are equally as important, and the first row lets you choose between your active abilities that you want to use, while the ones beneath are generally for buffing these abilities up or your character in different ways. Like, do you want a cool single target hit or more AoE stomp, or maybe a shout that can both buff as well as heal you? All of these are possible and way more. For example, for the flying kick, there's an upgrade early that can make enemies vulnerable, but of course there are more interesting options coming up later. Many of the skill cards are given when leveling up, completing main story missions, but the more exquisite, stronger ones will drop from side missions, loot caches, and oftentimes can be found just laying around the environments that you visit. That's why it's also important to make a mental note of the type of character that you want to play with. Right from the start, the game lets you choose between multiple characters, and they all come with 2 unique innate skills each. For example, I started with Dani because one of her skills lets her heal up when slaying multiple enemies very fast, but there are other options for more tanky builds and pretty much everything else in between. This also brings us to the Fury mode and the autophage mechanic. After a certain point in the main story, the game lets you go super zombie mode after filling the Fury gauge by just killing zombies. But this has a skill line of sorts, which is via the autophage tiers that you can see indicated right here by the gauge in the skill menu. There are 3 of these levels in total, and to reach the next tier, you need to just use these special cards with the autophage skills indicated on them. These are very easy to spot thanks to their distinctive icon in the center bottom, and they provide 1 tier each. So 3 cards is all you need to max out autophage, but you can obviously go with more if you find really interesting bonuses. Higher tiers of autophage provide higher boosts to Fury mode duration, Fury gain, damage, and even health, but there are some drawbacks to keep in mind. Specifically, the first tier reduces your peak health, then the second one your stamina regen, and finally the last one completely removes the passive health regen, plus reduces the effectiveness of the healing you get from consumables. I tried the build around with the max autophage, and it's actually super strong despite some of these drawbacks, and there are even skill cards in there that completely removes them. In this case, you can almost go infinitely with a full autophage mode as long as you have enemies to defeat, as you can continuously just generate that fury and also deal extremely high damage. But moving on to number 7, just like your character, your weapons can also be further upgraded with the new mods and elemental effects. Since there are lots of enemy types and weaknesses to consider, I suggest to always carry 1 weapon for each type of damage and always apply upgrades to any nearby workbench. Shock is great because it stuns enemies and deals continuous damage, plus it can also jump to a lot of targets and spread through water. Corrosive is another one that I really like since it literally melts enemies away and the animation is nothing short of badassery. But you don't want to sit there dealing no damage against insulated or hazmat enemies, so always bring up a normal damage weapon too. Either blunt or slash works just fine as long as you just deal damage to everything. You'll of course find blueprints for stronger weapon mods later on via the main story and the side content, so do visit that as well as the vendors to acquire more of them. But also pay attention to weapons that by default drop with higher level mods on them. These are the ones that you'll want to focus on a bit more since it takes a while until you can craft your own higher level variants. But that island 2 also lets you repair and even level match your gear to your current level. So in case you have a really good item and don't want to throw it away yet, you can just apply repairs at the workbench and level that up in exchange for some cash. Repairing it is something that you'll want to do often for the best weapons, but matching it to your level can become quite expensive, especially at the higher levels and for the higher quality loot. So I would only do it for the best items if I were you. Generally speaking, I don't find it to be worth it for the mid-game items since I was constantly getting new gear anyway at every step, but for the unique legendaries you'll get later on, this might be something you want to consider. Furthermore, the game simply showers you in loot as you progress, and even the items that you do not pick up because of limited inventory space, yeah, they will appear in your unclaimed property later on in the storage locker. It might even be a good idea to actually leave them laying around so that you can retrieve them in the much larger storage inventory. Early on, it's probably smart to scrap items and get the crafting components out of them, but later on, it won't be long until you completely max out the basic components, so you just have to sell them, otherwise it's kind of like a waste of resources. So once you start getting a lot of the rares and the epics you don't need, just sell them for a profit, and then you can funnel that money into just buying the items and the mats that you need from the vendors for super cheap. And finally, not too long in the main story, you will get to unlock fast travel via the maps around the safe spots. It's even going to let you choose if you want to play during the day or night in the next location you're traveling into, though I did not notice if this makes a difference in the enemies that spawn. This will make it super easy to go back to zones you visited before and grab the new stuff that you were missing or complete new side objectives. Anyway, this is pretty much it with Dead Island 2. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.